With Warcraft 2 being such a success, an expansion would be released only months later. Although the Second War had come to a close, the Orcs would not sit idly by on Draenor, and would launch an attack against Azeroth once more, with the Alliance venturing into the Rift in an event called the Invasion of Draenor. Not only did the expansion provide 24 new missions split among 2 campaigns, but it also introduced a lot more characters that would further shape the Alliance and Horde, such as Illyria Windrunner, Grommash Hellscream, and the Black Dragon Death Knight. Thankfully, the chronological order of missions is much easier to follow, with the majority of the Orc campaign happening prior to the events of the Human campaign. 8 years after the Dark Portal was first opened, and 2 years after the portal was destroyed, Ner'zhul would put a new plan into action. Before the invasion of Azeroth could begin again, Ner'zhul would need to gather all of the pieces. Most importantly, he would need the knowledge of the former Shadow Council on how to construct the portal again. The Death Knights that hold this information are currently under the control of an ogre necromancer named Mogor, who plans to use them to create a powerful spell. Mogor's Laughing Skull clan would need to be taken care of, and so Ner'zhul dispatched a small force of his Shadow Moon to subjugate the Death Knights for his own horde. Yet, to make this work, he would need other clans to join him. The first to accept his offer was Grommash Hellscream of the Warsong clan. Grom and his Warsong were the first to drink the demon's blood, but had been left out of the invasion of Azeroth, and now they were excited at the chance to fight something again, regardless of who it was that they were fighting. After freeing Grom and a number of Warsong held prisoner by the Laughing Skull, their small force marches into their camp and kills Mogor, with Oberys being put in command of the clan and forced to join the new horde. The Bone Chewer captain named Harkon Skullsplinter has come into the possession of Gul'dan's skull. Ever since the Warlock's death, the skull made it back to Draenor and has been passed around as a trophy. However, Ner'zhul needs the skull to open the rift, and so it must be claimed. Sending the ogre Dentarg to meet with Kargath Bladefist of the Shattered Hand clan, the two of them work together to convince Fenris Wolfbrother of the Thunderlord clan to join their army. Fenris would agree to the offer, as battle-starved as Grom and Kargath are, and they help to break into the Bone Chewer camp. The Bone Chewers would be broken, similar to the Laughing Skull, and Grom would claim the skull off Harkon's corpse. He would then appoint Tagar Spinebreaker to lead the Bone Chewers, so that they would also be brought into Ner'zhul's horde. With an army at his disposal and a way to open the rift, Ner'zhul and Gorfiend were ready to begin their plan. Ner'zhul had promised the clans he brought into his fold that they would have a chance to escape the dying Draenor and conquer a new, unsuspecting world for themselves. Yet there were those that still clung to the past. The Thunderlord and Bone Chewer clans wished to return to Azeroth once more. Hearing the tales of the Alliance from the refugees that made it back through the portal, they wished to test their mettle against the humans. They would succeed where Doomhammer had failed, and Azeroth would fall. This plan was in direct opposition to Ner'zhul's plans, which put them at odds. The Thunderlords and Bone Chewers would be put back in their place by the rest of the Horde. Azeroth was a lost cause, and why focus on one world when countless others were theirs for the taking? Once the rebellious clans had fallen back into line, Ner'zhul used the Skull of Gul'dan to open the rift, just enough to send through a small army and Gorfiend's strike force. Khadgar could sense magic welling up from the rift, and believed a new invasion was imminent. Illyria Windrunner, a high elf that assisted Turalyon during the Second War, made her way towards New Stormwind to ask for aid. At the start of the Second War, Illyria would lead her rangers to help the Alliance, seeing the Orcs as a threat, and traveled with Turalyon as they chased Doomhammer into the hinterlands. When Quel'Thalas was attacked, she reunited with her sister Sylvanas to fend off the Trolls, but when their younger brother Lyrith died in the battle, she sought Turalyon's comfort. She would meet with Turalyon, who would rally his forces in southern Stormwind, and with Daneth Trollbane, who was a veteran of the Second War, and entrusted with overseeing the Orc internment camps. Although the Alliance was still weary from the Second War, they were not willing to risk standing by while the Orcs invaded again. The Orcs would not gain another foothold on this world, and Netherguard Keep would gain the full support of the Alliance. As their forces marched into the Blasted Lands, they would realize that they were too late to prevent the events that were about to transpire. With the Skull of Gul'dan and the help of the Death Knights, the rift is opened once more. Grom led the first to charge in, breaking through the Alliance forces guarding the area. As the clans pushed their way back into Azeroth, along with Gorfiend and his Death Knights, a new frame was constructed around the rift. The Dark Portal would stand once more. Many of them would hold the ground around the Dark Portal to ensure it would not be destroyed again, but Grom would lead the Warsong clan in attacking the large citadel overlooking the portal. Claiming Netherguard Keep for themselves was not their primary objective, however, and instead they would serve as a distraction. With the Alliance's eyes focused on Netherguard Keep, Gorefiend would lead his Death Knights and a group of orcs, including the Thunderlord clan, north. Their job would be to hunt down and steal the necessary artifacts while Grom served as a distraction. Gorefiend would slip out from under the Alliance's watch and make their way to Blackrock Spire to enlist the help of the Blackrock clan. The orcs exploded out from the portal and began to lay siege to Netherguard Keep. Turalian's forces, along with the Keep's defenders under the command of Khadgar, have held out under their onslaught, but without reinforcements they would soon fall. Daneth organized a great number of troops from New Stormwind and rode to Netherguard, yet they would not have an easy time of reaching Turalian, as Grom's forces surrounded the citadel. He would need to break through their force and force them back in order to reinforce the Keep's defenses. By the time Daneth had arrived, more of the clans had already come through. The Bone Chewers, Laughing Skull, and Shattered Hand had already made their way into the Blasted Lands, and Daneth's meager force could not stand against their ever-growing numbers. He would be the only one to reach Netherguard, and despite the defeat, he believed that he could contain the orcs in the Blasted Lands until the rest of the Alliance forces could arrive. Surprisingly, he was right, as the orcs would not breach Netherguard or move further north into the Swamp of Sorrows. The Blackrock clan would prove no help to Gorefiend, as they would turn away his offer to join them. They would remain hidden away in Blackrock Spire and proclaim themselves the true heirs of Blackhand's Horde. The Bleeding Hollow, on the other hand, would offer their assistance. When the portal was destroyed, Kilrog led his clan into the surrounding jungles, where they had managed to escape from capture by the Alliance. The information they gave about Azeroth after the Second War would prove invaluable to Gorefiend, and he allowed them to return through the portal to rest. It had been a long 2 years hiding in the jungles. The Dragon Maw would also not be of any assistance, but an unexpected stranger came to meet with Gorefiend. Traveling far from the Northlands, the dragon Deathwing would approach Gorefiend and offer the services of his black dragons. He watched the orcs throughout the Second War and sought to make a deal. In exchange for his aid, Deathwing wanted the orcs to transport precious cargo back to Draenor. Gorefiend would agree to the deal, and Deathwing would inform him of where 2 of the artifacts were. Up until now, Gorefiend knew only the location of the Book of Medivh, which would be their first target. The mad guardian Medivh was slain during the First War, but the magical knowledge he procured before his death was invaluable. His last surviving spellbook had been retrieved and brought to the library in Stormwind Keep for safeguarding. Sensing the presence of the book in Stormwind, Gorefiend and Deathwing descended upon the city. Dragons and Death Knights tore open the city as they forced their way into the castle, and as Gorefiend approached the library, he found that he was already too late. The guards to the library were already dead, with a strange blade shoved into one's neck. The book was snatched out of his grasp before he could claim it, but forces from the Bleeding Hollow pointed out that the blade in question was one of Alteraci design, and the spellbook was likely on its way north. From here, Gorefiend would split his forces into 3 groups, tasking each one with finding one of the artifacts they needed. He would lead his forces towards Alterac to chase after Medivh's book. The dragons would not be able to carry one of the groups all the way to their destination, and so they would steal a number of ships from Menethil Harbor to carry them. The Death Knight Ragnarok Bloodreaver was assigned to follow Fenris and Tagar to the Tomb of Sargeras, and retrieve the Scepter of Sargeras. The journey to the Broken Isles would be a long and arduous one, made all the more difficult by the Alliance's great navy. Kultiras had been a thorn in the side of the Horde throughout the Second War due to their vast fleets of ships at their disposal. No doubt they would hunt down the orc ships. The Horde would quickly assemble a navy and head out with the Black Dragons to assault Kultiras and prevent them from following afterwards. As they got to work, they did not realize that they were being watched. After escaping in the hinterlands, Garona made her way south and reunited with Khadgar, where they worked to free her mind from the Shadow Council's magic. She would follow Gorefiend's party and return to Khadgar with news of what they were planning. While she wished to help Khadgar further, she turned her attention to hunting down the last of the Shadow Council on Azeroth, catching the trail of Cho'Gall and sailing into the west. Lord Admiral Proudmoore's fleet would no longer trouble the Horde, as they launched a surprise attack against Kultiras. Black dragons rained down fire from above as the Horde sent the human ships to the bottom of the harbor. Kultiras would not find any aid from the Alliance, as though they had stuck with King Tyrannus' side through the political turmoil following the Second War, the Alliance was being assaulted from all sides. With the Kultiran fleet destroyed, the Horde would have free reign over the Great Sea, and Fenris would sail west towards the Broken Isles. Gorefiend and Deathwing would continue heading north to Alterac and claim the Book of Medivh. Proudmoore would take this information to the Alliance, informing them that the Horde forces were mobilized all over the Eastern Kingdoms, seeking out powerful artifacts. Unfortunately, by the time the Alliance had turned their attention to the problem, Gorefiend would already have his prizes. The old, crumbling encampments of the Stormreaver and Twilight's Hammer were anything but silent. The ghosts of the fallen clans wailed their agony and continued to walk the earth, forever playing out their final battle. When Fenris and his group arrived on the island, they would be attacked by the restless spirits and the demons that walked the land. They would need to fight their way into the tomb to find the artifact, though the efforts would be well worth it. The Scepter of Sargeras had the ability to tear open rifts in reality just for a moment, which would be crucial to Ner'zhul's plan. Fenris would suffer heavy losses, however, as the scepter would be deep within the tomb. The demons and ghosts would tear into his army all the way there, and they would continue to be hounded by them as they retreated back to their ships. Far too many had been lost to claim the scepter, but Fenris sailed back to the Dark Portal to regroup with Gorfiend once his mission was finished. The scepter would be entrusted to the Bleeding Hollow until the moment of victory had come. During the time the Alliance was still arguing about what to do with Alterac, Deathwing and Gorfiend arrived to search for the Book of Medivh. Deathwing, under the guise of Lord Davil Prester, had been trying to convince the Alliance to give him control of Alterac, and drove Aiden Paranold mad so that he could not contradict the disguised dragon. Paranold offered the Book of Medivh to Gorfiend in exchange for destroying the Alliance forces within Alterac, raving and demanding that Lordaeron be removed from his lands. Gorfiend decided to humor Paranold, and sent Deathwing to burn down the outpost stations in Alterac. Such chaos would only further strain the Alliance and divide their attention. The book would be Gorfiend's to claim, and the spells therein would aid in the ritual of opening more portals. With his business in Alterac handled, Gorfiend turned his eyes to the kingdom of Dalaran to group up with his forces there, and would leave Paranold to his fate. Only one artifact remains to be collected in the hands of the Kirin Tor. They had created a tool known as the Eye of Dalaran to focus their magical energies in an attempt to rebuild the city of Dalaran following the Second War. Now, Ner'zhul needed it in order to focus the energies needed to open the portals. Dalaran's defenses had been rebuilt since the war, and the orcs sent ahead could not break through. Thus, Gorfiend saw to it that the shoreline was broken through and carved his way into the city. The mages were formidable opponents, and several of Gorfiend's Death Knights fell at the hands of Antonidas, Kael'thas, and Crassus. Yet they were unable to kill or capture Gorfiend, and the Death Knight was able to break into the arcane vault located in the Violet Citadel. With the Eye of Dalaran in his possession, Gorfiend called for Deathwing, who flew in to collect the remaining forces in Dalaran. With all of the artifacts collected, Gorfiend and Deathwing flew south towards the Dark Portal to head back to Draenor. The Alliance had dug in their heels at the Blasted Lands, and the Warsong and Shattered Hand clans were struggling to fight them off. Hellscream still held the charge against Nethergard, and it gave Gorfiend an opening through the area. His forces would break through the human station in the area, away from Nethergard Keep, where their defenses were not as strong, and made his way to the portal. Deathwing and his black dragons brought in wagons with their cargo to take with them. The carts were magically covered and sealed, preventing any mortal eyes from peering in at what lay within. Gorfiend cared little about what was actually in the carts, and allowed them to be taken through the portal into Draenor. There, Deathwing hoped to use the black dragon eggs inside to rebuild his broken flight. On the other side, Gorfiend would move to Hellfire Citadel to meet with Ner'zhul and deliver the artifacts. Leaving the Warsong and Shattered Hand to deal with the humans, they did not expect that they would be followed. Having pieced together Ner'zhul's plan, Khadgar and Turalyon agreed the Horde could not be allowed to open more portals. Azeroth had suffered enough, and if they had the chance to prevent what happened to them from happening to other worlds, then they would take it. Turalyon rallied the Sons of Lothar, and several Second War veterans including Illyria, Daneth, and the dwarf Kurdran Wildhammer. They would follow Gorfiend through the portal and take the fight to Draenor. Grom still held strong against the Alliance forces, but with the added pressure of their march forward, Turalyon punched through the orcs and made their way to the Dark Portal. The Warsong clan was driven off in all directions, and Kargath led some of his Shattered Hand back through the portal to Draenor, where they would retreat to Hellfire Citadel. The Dark Portal would exchange hands over the course of the conflict, with Grom's forces stationed in the nearby hills, and striking out in an attempt to take the portal from the forces at Nethergard. For the first time since the orcs first built the portal, the Alliance set foot on the alien soil of Draenor. The barren and red wasteland surrounding the Alliance expedition was all that remained of the Tanaan jungle. The first thing they would need to do was establish their foothold in the new world, and they would begin to fortify around the Dark Portal. The site had been chosen by Ner'zhul to conduct his ritual, as it was built upon the convergence of many powerful ley lines, but with it in the Alliance hands, he would need to find somewhere else, and began to head to the southeast Shadowmoon Valley. The Alliance, not knowing this, would launch an attack against Hellfire Citadel in an effort to stop Ner'zhul. They would instead encounter Kargath. Dentarg would be slain by Khadgar, and Kargath was forced to retreat as the Alliance overwhelmed him from both land and sky. Before Dentarg's death, Khadgar was able to learn about the artifacts that had been stolen. He theorized that if they were able to reclaim these relics, they would be able to reseal the portal and undo the damage Medivh had done all those years ago. With their presence firmly established in Hellfire Peninsula, the Alliance would need a fleet to drive off the remaining clans in the area and secure the peninsula for the Alliance. The nearby port of Zeth-Kur would be their target, where the Horde's shipyard served as a way to transport their troops around Draenor. Although initially the Orcs were taken by surprise by the Alliance's incursion, they would quickly recover, and their fury would drive them to try and wipe out the humans. Draenor was their world, and nobody was going to take it from them. Khadgar would also sense a strong presence to the north. Once Deathwing had crossed over into Draenor, he left a few token dragons with the Horde, before taking his eggs and heading to the northern crags of Gorgrond, taking the skull of Gul'dan as a prize. Their forces could not simply deal with Ner'zhul alone, so Khadgar left Daneth to follow the Warchief's trail, while he would retrieve the skull of Gul'dan to seal the portal on Draenor's side. Kurdran Wildhammer would scout out the Orcs' march south and find them heading towards Shadowmoon Valley. His Griffin Riders would rain down lightning on them, forcing Ner'zhul to the ancient crypt network known as Auchindoun. The Bleeding Hollow had made it into their stronghold and offered to hold off the Alliance while Ner'zhul escaped. Daneth Trollbane's ground forces followed shortly behind, and he would lead his forces against the Bleeding Hollow, thinking Ner'zhul had trapped himself in the structure. Although the humans had superior numbers, the cramped passageways would offer little space for fighting, and the Orcs knew the land better than Daneth did. Still, Daneth pushed into Auchindoun, laying waste to the Bleeding Hollow clan within. He was disappointed to see that Ner'zhul had already slipped through his grasp, and that they were not able to follow him through the maze-like catacombs. Kilrogg Deadeye, however, would not let him pass. Chieftains of the Bleeding Hollow hold a tradition of sacrificing an eye to see a vision of their own death. Within the crypt, Kilrogg would face Daneth in a fierce battle, a smile plastered on his face as Daneth slid his blade through his throat. High atop his perch in Gorgrond, Deathwing planned to see his dragonflight reborn. Driven mad by the whispers beneath the earth on Azeroth, he had betrayed the other dragonflights, and now the black dragons lay shattered. His presence would anger a great Grahn by the name of Gruul. Khadgar, Illyria, and Turalyon would make a deal with Gruul to lure the dragon out of hiding so that Gruul could deal with him. Once they found a hatchery full of black dragon eggs that was left unguarded, they began to smash them and draw Deathwing out of hiding. Their plan would work as the Earthwarder would fly down in a rage. Gruul was not standing idly by, instead catching any black dragons and skewering them on the sharpened spines of the mountains. When Deathwing emerged, the two engaged in a great battle that nearly killed the black dragon aspect. At the last minute, Deathwing would turn tail and head back south, fleeing through the portal back to Azeroth. Gruul became the undisputed master of Gorgrond, adopting the name the Dragon Killer for his deeds, while Khadgar collected Gul'dan's skull from Deathwing's lair and heading back south to regroup with Daneth and Kurdran. While the Alliance had been chasing the artifacts on Draenor, the Horde had time to reorganize themselves. Now, they were pushing back against the Alliance, and if Khadgar did not close the portal soon, they would be overwhelmed, and the Orcs would be free to invade Azeroth once more, or any other world they saw fit to claim. Khadgar, Illyria, and Turalyon would meet back up with Daneth and Kurdran along the coast of Shadowmoon Valley. The Orcish Armada had established a number of strongholds along the coastline, hoping to slow down their military power and to buy their other forces some more time. The Alliance expedition moves from stronghold to stronghold, razing it to the ground and making their way towards the Black Temple. An old Draenei temple of worship, the Temple of Karabor, was claimed by the Orcs when they had first drank the blood of Manaroth, and Gul'dan twisted it into the Black Temple. With the Alliance laying claim to the Dark Portal, the Black Temple would be the next best place for Ner'zhul to conduct his ritual. As the Alliance pushed through the Orcish Horde, they would stand outside of the gates to the Black Temple and gather their strength for the final assault. The time had come to stop Ner'zhul, and the Alliance was ready to finish the conflict. They would charge into the Black Temple and fight their way up to its summit. At the same time, Ner'zhul would begin the ritual. Karen Gorefiend and his Death Knights would meet the Alliance in combat, hoping to hold them off until Ner'zhul was finished. While they held strong for the most part, Gorefiend and Turalyon would face each other down. Gorefiend would fall to Turalyon's blade, and his Death Knights would scatter from the temple. The remaining Shadowmoon Orcs that were defending the temple would similarly fall before the Alliance, and they would be cleared to the summit. Khadgar pressed on, intent on stopping Ner'zhul and destroying his mystic sanctum. The Book of Medivh would be the last artifact Khadgar needed in order to seal the portal, but he would not find it once he reached the summit of the temple. Instead, he would be greeted with the ramifications of Ner'zhul's spell gone awry. With victory at hand, Ner'zhul abandoned any honor or altruism he held in his heart. Numerous portals opened all around him, and those loyal to him would follow Ner'zhul through the largest of the portals to be opened. They would abandon the Horde to their fate on Draenor. Yet Ner'zhul could not have predicted the consequences of his actions. The spell destabilized the ley lines running beneath the Black Temple, which unleashed a devastating chain reaction that began to unravel all of the powerful magical energies on Draenor. The portals would begin to drag Draenor into the hellish domain of the Twisting Nether as the planet began to tear itself apart. The lands split apart and the seas would boil away as unimaginable forces tore at the fabric of reality. Atop the Black Temple, Khadgar would recover the Eye of Dalaran, but the Scepter of Sargeras was brought by Ner'zhul through the portal, and the Book of Medivh was missing. If action was not taken to remedy the situation, the volatile energies would erupt through the portal, and Azeroth would collapse in the same way Draenor was currently undergoing. Once Draenor began to unravel, all hell broke loose. As Khadgar was searching the Black Temple for the Book of Medivh, word came from Hellfire Peninsula. Although they were ill-equipped, a massive orc force had broken through the Alliance fortifications at Hellfire Citadel and were making their way to the Dark Portal. The forces defending the portal were holding them off, but would not hold for long. The forces at the Black Temple would swiftly return to Hellfire Peninsula to reinforce those defending the portal. If the orcs took control of the portal, there would be no hope of closing it before Draenor was blown apart, and so they could only hope that they could withstand the onslaught long enough for the book to be located. Fel-infused storms raged across the battlefield as orcs fought hard to escape through the portal, with the Alliance struggling to hold them back. Hope was beginning to run out as no sign of Medivh's tome could be found, until Khadgar was approached by the Laughing Skull chieftain, Oberys. At the beginning of Ner'zhul's scheming, he had subjugated the Laughing Skull clan, and turned Oberys into his unwilling pawn. But with Ner'zhul gone, Oberys was loyal to nobody except for his own clan, and he desired revenge. He had stolen the Book of Medivh at the Black Temple, and now offered it to Khadgar in exchange for a favor from the Alliance. The volatile energies of the Twisting Nether had transformed Gorgrond and Frostfire Ridge into the Blade's Edge Mountains, where the remaining Thunderlord clan had laid their claim. Though Oberys was mortally wounded by Ner'zhul when he protested that he was abandoning the Horde, he still wished for his people to gain dominion over all others in the northern lands, and asked the Alliance to escort the Laughing Skull north and destroy the Thunderlords in the area. With little other choice, a detachment was sent from the Dark Portal, as many as could be spared, to fight against the Thunderlord clan. They would not stand alone, as the traitorous Laughing Skull would join them in battle. Oberys, with his last dying breath, turned over the Book of Medivh, grateful that his final act was to spit on Ner'zhul and his abandoned Horde. The Dark Portal would need to be closed from both sides of the rift, and so Khadgar, Turalyon, and the other members of the Alliance expedition made the decision to stay behind and close the portal on the Draenor side. Though it would cost them their lives and the lives of their companions, all would fight for the safety of Azeroth. With the combined powers of the Skull of Gul'dan and the Book of Medivh, Khadgar offered to be the one to close it. The path to the Dark Portal from the Blade's Edge Mountains was treacherous, as the Orc Horde was still trying to push their way through into Azeroth. Dimensional rifts tore open across the skies, and fire burst forth from the earth as they made haste towards the portal. Draenor was heaving its final death throes as the hour of its destruction was upon those still on the planet. Upon reaching the portal, Khadgar began to work his spell. Although the abandoned Orc clans fought desperately to escape, Turalyon and his forces would keep them at bay just long enough for Khadgar to finish the spell. Khadgar would pour the magic of the artifacts into the portal, causing the rift to untangle itself and close off, severing the two worlds once more. As it was closing, a griffin rider would fly through the portal with the three artifacts. Only the Skull of Gul'dan and the Book of Medivh would make it through to the other side, with the Eye of Dalaran being lost somewhere through the traversal of the collapsing portal. Once the gravity of their situation hit them, Khadgar led the Alliance survivors through a nearby rift to safety. They did not know where it would take them, but anywhere else was better than staying on Draenor. Many would be lost through the rift, including Turalyon and Illyria. They would be presumed dead, leaving behind their son on Azeroth. Unable to withstand the magical energies any further, Draenor would explode in a cataclysmic event. Some of the planet would survive the explosion, though its remnants would be hurled throughout the Twisting Nether. The great planet of Draenor, once home to the orcs, the ogres, and a whole host of other great races, was no more. A large fragment of Draenor would drift through the Twisting Nether, though it would be left unrecognizable. This fragment would become known as Outland, with Hellfire Peninsula would remain, along with the Blade's Edge Mountains to the north and Shadowmoon Valley to the southeast. The island of Farallon that lay on the northeast coast would crash into the mountain range. change, becoming the region of Netherstorm. The Zangar Sea, born from the corpse of the great spore mound Zang in a time long lost, would drain of its water and become the Zangar Marsh, and would be the only remaining source of water to the inhabitants of Outland. Similarly, the forests of Talador would remain intact, although twisted and mutated. It would be called the Terakar Forest. The verdant plains of Nagrand were surprisingly left intact by the explosion. Having been spared from the fell-fueled decay of the rest of Draenor, it was a home to many refugees from both the initial Horde invasions and from the destruction of the planet. Others were not so lucky, as Ashran, the spires of Iraq, and the ogre capital of Highmaul would all be lost to the surrounding void. Although much of their numbers were lost, Khadgar led the Alliance survivors back through the rift into Outland. They found a broken world, cut off from their home. The Sons of Lothar would remain in Outland and dedicate themselves to fighting the demons that were looking to claim the area, as they poured in from their nearby strongholds within the Twisting Nether. They would maintain a number of fortresses across Outland, such as Honor Hold, just outside of Hellfire Citadel, Illyrian Stronghold in Terakar Forest, and Wildhammer Stronghold in Shadowmoon Valley. They would find the help of the world's natives, such as the Broken. Once Draenei, the fell energies of the planet had transformed them over time until they were left unrecognizable. The energies of the Twisting Nether would also have an effect on the black dragon eggs that were stored in the Blade's Edge Mountains. The bodies of the dragons inside would mutate and transform into energetic beings. They would become the Netherwing Flight, and would hold no allegiance to Deathwing, instead seeking to establish their home in the chaotic and dangerous world of Outland. On Azeroth, only a few survivors made it back through the portal. Both orc and human made their way back, where the orcs would immediately surrender to the Alliance forces. Those of the Alliance expedition that made their way back told those on Azeroth of what had happened on Draenor and the noble sacrifice that had been made there. Statues of 5 of the great champions that led the expedition would be built in Stormwind to honor their memories: Khadgar, Turalyon, Illyria, Kurdrin, and Danath. All were presumed to be either dead from the planet's explosion or were lost somewhere within the Twisting Nether. Regardless, little hope remained of ever seeing those that stepped through the portal again. Eretor would grow up in the care of his aunt and uncle, Varisa Windrunner and Ronan. Though Varisa and Sylvanas would grieve the loss of another one of their siblings, life would continue for them. Eretor would grow up to be a paladin, just as his father was before him. The Book of Medivh and the Skull of Gul'dan were recovered from the wreckage of the Dark Portal and would be brought to Dalaran for safekeeping. Ner'zhul and his loyal followers would pass through the largest rift that opened once they completed the spell. On the other side, they would be apprehended by the demon lord Kil'jaeden. The orcs would be handed over to the hands of the Dreadlords and horrifically tortured until Ner'zhul's sanity wore away and he agreed to serve Kil'jaeden. Ner'zhul and his followers would have their flesh stripped from their bones and their bodies would unravel until only a spectral entity remained. The Dreadlords would bind these spectral entities to special jars called phylacteries, from which they would project a physical form from and be reborn as liches. These immortal sorcerers were gifted with powers of frost and shadow. Ner'zhul himself would suffer a much worse fate. His soul was ripped from his body and attached to a suit of armor, which would be encased in a block of solid ice. Azeroth had proven particularly difficult for the Burning Legion to conquer in the past, and so Kil'jaeden put the Dreadlord Tychondrius in command of bringing it to its knees. The undead liches and their new Lich King would prove to be a valuable tool in their new invasion. When the portal to Draenor closed, Grom and his Warsong clan were left stranded on Azeroth. They would receive word of the planet's destruction and seek to find a new home. For 15 years they would evade the Alliance forces in the area and hide within the wilderness. Over this time, Grom began to understand what the Warlocks had done to his people. A weariness would tug at his bones and threaten to swallow him whole, but Grom's will was stronger than the fell withdrawal, and he would lead his people with the same iron will to prevent them from falling to the same fate as those in the internment camps. It would be a struggle he would hold until the end of his days. Doomhammer, within his prison at the Undercity, would find a chance to break free of his chains and would flee into the wilds. He would sneak into one of the internment camps, expecting to find warriors, but only found listless and lethargic prisoners. Despair overcame him, and Doomhammer would almost give in to the same malaise, but instead would retreat into the wilds once more. Finding a secluded and hidden area of Lordaeron, he would live as a hermit in shame. The alliance of Lordaeron was buckling under the weight of its actions. The treasuries of its nations were bled dry through the construction of orc camps, Netherguard Keep, and New Stormwind. Arguments over Alterac further drove a wedge between Gilneas and Stromgarde and King Tyrannus. The final nail in the coffin were reports of orcs breaking free from their camps. While they had been a non-threat for over a decade, a group of orcs had risen up and began to liberate those that were imprisoned. A new horde seemed to be on the rise, prompting Greymane to once again point out that they never should have been left alive. Gilneas would withdraw from the Alliance, constructing a massive wall around their lands and sealing themselves off from the outside world. In Dalaran, the Archmage Kel'Thuzad would be exiled from the city and would be stripped of his rank on their Council of Six, once Antonidas discovered his experiments in dark, necromantic magic. Kel'Thuzad would leave Dalaran in disgrace, but hearing whispers in his head, he would sail to the frozen roof of the world in search of answers. Alexstrasza became an important asset of the Dragonmaw following the Second War, as she was their only remaining weapon against the Alliance. Deathwing, however, saw little use for her to live. Having betrayed the other flights long ago, it was he who showed Nekros how to use the Demon Soul to bind Alexstrasza, but with the destruction of his eggs on Draenor, he planned to use the Red Dragon Eggs to rebuild his flight. He convinced the Dragonmaw to move Alexstrasza to Dun Algaz, hoping to lure her into the open, but his plans were interrupted by Coriolstraz and his Red Dragons, along with the help from the Alliance, led by Ronan. The battle was a bloody conflict as the Dragonmaw attempted to hold off the Red Dragons, and Nekros would attempt to use the Demon Soul to bind Deathwing and gain the upper hand. Unbeknownst to him, the Black Dragonflight were immune to the power of the Demon Soul, and Deathwing escaped the conflict. Nekros would be killed by Alexstrasza and swallowed whole. Breaking free of her chains, Alexstrasza laid waste to the remaining Dragonmaw clan, and Ronan used a scale of Deathwing to scar the Demon Soul, forever destroying it. Deathwing's plan had failed, and the other dragon aspects had come out of hiding to end his madness. Deathwing had once convinced the other dragons to pour their powers into a magical artifact called the Dragon Soul to fend off the last demonic invasion of Azeroth, but he did not put in his own power, revealing the Dragon Soul's actual purpose of subjugating the other dragons. Ysera of the Green Dragonflight, Nosdormu of the Bronze Dragonflight, and Malagos of the Blue Dragonflight would travel to Grim Batol and strike at Deathwing. Although still weakened from his battle with Gruul, he overpowered the three aspects. The fight turned against him, however, once Ronan destroyed the Demon Soul. The power of the dragon aspects was restored to them, and with Alexstrasza now free, the four of them hunted down Deathwing. Deathwing managed to evade the dragon aspects and escape to the elemental plane of Deepholm. He had retreated here once before after he failed to kill the other dragons at the construction of the Dragon Soul, and so his presence did not disturb the elementals there for the time being. King Taranis Menethil would have two children, the youngest of whom would be named Arthas. Arthas would be brought up to be a kind and disciplined man, trained in combat by the Ironforge ambassador Muradin Bronzebeard, and in the ways of the light by the paladin Uther the Lightbringer. Both were veterans of the Second War that Taranis held in high regards. Though Arthas was headstrong and stubborn, he became one of the youngest members to be inducted into the Silver Hand at the age of 19, and distinguished himself as a brave hero unafraid of the most dangerous of missions. He would soon court Jaina Proudmoore, daughter of Lord Admiral Dalen, as the two had known each other since they were children when Jaina left Kultiris to study with the Kirin Tor. She would become the apprentice to Antonidas himself, and the two young lovers would spark whispers and rumors in the royal courts, ultimately leading to their breakup. Still, their love for each other would not wane over the years, even as they pursued their own ambitions. Adalus Blackmore would be put in command of the internment camps in Lordaeron. He had been a clever strategist like his father, and saw the task as a punishment for his father's betrayal of the Alliance, but he would have a secret weapon in his corner. Years ago, he would find an infant orc washed up on the river. Despite his better judgment, he decided not to kill the orc, but instead to raise it as his own, and named the child Thrall. Thrall would be trained as a gladiator, and once he proved himself to be more than a simple dumb orc, Blackmore trained him in strategy, philosophy, and leadership. The orcs under his watch had once been great warriors, and Blackmore hoped to use Thrall to lead the orcs to overthrow the Alliance, putting himself on top. Blackmore would rebuild the Alliance in his own image, but his cruelty and drinking would cause Thrall to see him as a monster. With the help of his friend, Taretha Foxton, Thrall would escape from Durnhold Keep. In the wilds, Thrall would meet with Grom, who would point him in the direction of Alterac, where the remaining Frostwolf clan made their home. There, he would meet with their shaman, Drekthar, and learn of who he truly was. He learned of his mother and father and what they had died for. He learned of the great clans of Draenor and the corruption that befell them. Thrall was born an orc, but he did not belong with them. He did not know of their culture or their beliefs. He would learn shamanism through Drekthar, but his most important teacher was a hermit in the woods. Knowing that Thrall was alive dug up painful memories for Doomhammer, but teaching him what it meant to live and fight as an orc brought peace to the old warrior's soul. Thrall would become Doomhammer's second in command, and the two of them would rejoin with Grom. Together, they would work to free other orcs from the internment camps. their spirit of freedom helping to lift the lethargy that had gripped them and driving them to fight back against their jailers. During one of their raids against one of the camps, Doomhammer would fall in battle. With his last breath, he would make Thrall his successor and the new war chief of the Horde. Thrall would inherit Doomhammer's legendary weapon, along with his armor and responsibilities. Hoping to end the internment camps in one fell swoop, Thrall marched back to Ner'zhul Keep to meet with Blackmoor. He asked to parley peacefully with Blackmoor, not wanting to resort to violence. In response, Blackmoor would sever the head of Taretha and throw it over the walls at Thrall. Taretha had thought of Thrall as a younger brother and been one of the few to show him kindness, and this was her repayment for helping him escape. Enraged, Thrall stormed the keep, and the Horde would free all of those trapped within. Blackmoor would retreat deeper into the camp, where he would be confronted and killed by Thrall. With Blackmoor dead and the administration of the camps crumbling, Thrall would have an easy time liberating the smaller camps and seek a new home for his people on Azeroth. The world was in as terrible a state as it had ever been. The Alliance had fallen apart, save for a few that refused to let it die. The Orcs had broken free of their chains, and their intentions were far from known. A pestilence began to seep into the Eastweald, and villages began to die off. Lady Prester, daughter of Davil Prester, became a high-ranking noble in Stormwind's court. She would tear them apart from within, convincing the other nobles not to pay the Stonemasons Guild for their work rebuilding the city. Riots broke out, resulting in the death of Queen Tiffin Wrynn, and nearly causing the death of her son, Anduin Wrynn. Meanwhile, in the north, Kel'Thuzad worked in secret to grow a cult in service to the Lich King. He would make a deal with the Barov family at Kardaro to turn their estate into a school for both training new necromancers and performing his own research. All the while, a great spirit watched the world as the shadow loomed overhead. A great prophet that knew the invasion of the Legion was imminent set out to encourage others on their journey so that perhaps Azeroth might be saved.